Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas! Woo! What is happening, guys? My name is Burgz, and today we are hitting you with the first tipping and predictions video for the season. How good is it? Footy is just around the corner, and I know you guys have been clamoring to hear my first round tips for this year. Before we get into my tips this year, guys, let me remind you that we are running fantasy and tipping comps this year here on The Casual Athlete. Please make sure that you go to the link in the description. I'll also put it up here on the screen for you, so please feel free to pause the video and join the competition as necessary. Right now, we've got a lot of people coming into those comps, so yep, get in there as quick as possible. Make sure you get in before round one just so we can be safe on that one. Now, for the first game this year, guys, we are headed to Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, where the Sea Eagles will be taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, the 3rd of March. Now, really interesting to start the comp on a Sunday, so make sure that you guys have that one locked down in your calendar. Yeah, great for football just to see it go over to America. It's such a big part of the world at this stage as well. And then the other thing that I also like to do here is go through the head-to-head at this point in time. So over the last 10 matches, the Sea Eagles have only won 3 games against South Sydney. However, South Sydney's start to the season for me is going to be a little bit jumbled. They do have a couple of injuries in the outside backs. Jack Whiten not available for this game as well. So it could be a very tough opening to the season for South Sydney. And Manly, I think they're at full fitness. They only just got better as well, with Brooks coming across from the Tigers. They have a fit Tom Trbojevic, and that is music to the ears of every single Manly fan out there right now. I do worry about Josh Schuster a little bit. I'm not sure where he's going to play this year. That second row spot, heavily contested to start the season with either Schuster or people saying Ben Trbojevic should start there. They've got guys like Ben Condon and Bullimore as well. Yeah, I do think Manly get the win in this game. I know they haven't got a great head-to-head record with Souths, especially over the last 10 games, as I just said. But something tells me that Manly will start the season hot this year and maybe fade away, whereas I think Souths could build a little bit more towards the finals, especially getting some of those players back. No Campbell Graham for them, Tyrone Munro out, and as I said, Jack Whiten before. I've got to go with the Manly Sea Eagles, 1-12. The next game up on the Vegas doubleheader is the Sydney Roosters taking on the Brisbane Broncos grand finalists from last year. Now, these two teams look powerful heading into this season with some great sides or team lists that should come out for round one. With the Broncos, they've just re-signed Adam Reynolds for another year, which to me is not a bad move for them. I think having a number 7 who is as experienced as Adam Reynolds is, he took them all the way to the grand final last year. Yes, he's not been that lucky come finals time, but I do think that Adam Reynolds is a very solid halfback and definitely one of the top, I want to say top 5 halfbacks in the game at this point in time. The form guide for this game over the last 10 games between these two clubs, the Roosters have it 6-4, with the most recent game being last year in July between these two teams, where the Broncos went home 32-10 winners. Now, last year we know the Roosters were at 6s and 7s last year, that they couldn't really get any momentum into the season until really the last couple of rounds, and they kind of surged into the finals, narrowly losing to the Storm. But I just think round one, the Broncos could have a bit of grand final hangover. I think this Roosters team looks very strong on paper. Tedesco looking to have a bounce back year as well. I think it could be close in front of the American fans over there. So I'm going to go the Roosters in this game, 1-12. For the first game in Australia this season, the Knights have been given the honours at McDonald Jones Stadium against the Canberra Raiders for the Thursday night 7th of March matchup. Now, the Knights last year had a great hot streak. They won 10 games in a row, something that hadn't been done in the club's history. And it's really hard for me to say that they're not going to do that again this year. They have pretty much the same team minus Dom Young. And for the Canberra Raiders, they lost a lot. They lost basically the heart and soul of the team in Jack Whiten. A lot of pieces going to have to come together for the Raiders this year. But in the last 10 games between these two teams, the Knights have dominated the fixture, winning 7 of those last 10 games. They're currently on a 3-game winning streak as well against the Raiders. Played 2 games last year against them and won them pretty tightly and pretty comfortably as well. So a bit of a mixture there. Yeah, it's tough for me to pick this one. I think that Newcastle are coming in, they had a great season last year. Will there be a bit of hangover potentially? The Raiders, no one really expects them to do too much this year. And it could be a classic case of the Knights may be a little bit underprepared for this game, but I am going to pick them. However, I do think the score will be a bit closer than people think. I think the Raiders will come out all guns blazing. The youngsters will give it a fair crack, but they just won't have enough experience. I expect that to happen to the Raiders a lot this year. I expect them to not win those close games that they won last year. They had a lot of games where they won by either a score or just got over the line, and I expect that to maybe tip the other way this year. I expect them to maybe lose a couple of games just by a score, and then maybe not get there in the end for a few of those games. So I'm going to go the Newcastle Knights 1-12. Our next matchup on Friday night takes us across the Trans-Tasman, where the Warriors will host the Cronulla Sharks. And the Warriors, again, much like the Knights that I just spoke about, had a crazy year last year. No one expected them to finish where they finished, inside the top 4. And what a brilliant result that was. Waz Nation took over the NRL and our hearts. And that is football in essence. You want a team to come out of nowhere, to do something unexpected, and that was the Warriors last year. Do I think they're going to come into the competition this year and do exactly the same thing? No. I don't think for Warriors fans that they need to worry too much. I do expect the Warriors to be competitive this year. I just don't think that they can recapture the same magic. It was such a big buzz around them last year. It's very hard to come in and do exactly the same thing. Teams will, read up about them, do a lot of research, watch a lot of film. They'll get used to the way that the Warriors play as well. And that's half the battle. You've got to maybe produce some new things that other teams haven't seen. The Warriors last year, it was a pretty simple game plan. Run it through the middle, give it to Adam Fanua-Blake and Tohu Harris, and then let Sean Johnson kick off the back of it. They played very straight up completion rate style football, and that definitely won them a lot of games. It was very un-Warriors like, if you don't mind me saying. For the Sharks this year, I just want to see them compete against top 8 teams. They haven't done it for the last couple of years, and they've had a shocking record against teams making the 8, and they seem to dominate the bottom half of the 8. This year, they do have a pretty favourable schedule. They do get to play the Dogs, the Dragons, and the Tigers twice each. So those are 3 of the bottom teams from last year, and they do get to play them. So you think they're probably going to bank most of those points. In this fixture against the Warriors team at home, fresh, it's a tough one for Cronulla. I think the Warriors have a better forward pack. Not saying too much. They did lose Josh Curran, but they do have a lot of guys coming into their own at the moment as well. And RTS is back, and you've always got to watch him. So I actually think the Warriors will get this one done, and I think it might be pretty comfortable for the Cronulla Sharks, although the Sharks do start seasons pretty well. And in this matchup over the last 10 games, they have won 6 out of the last 10. However, the Warriors have beaten them twice last year. This one could go either way. I'm going to lean the Warriors, but I actually think they make it pretty comfortably, 13 plus. The next matchup is a blockbuster for your Friday night down at Amy Park. We have the Melbourne Storm taking on the Penrith Panthers. And as we know, Melbourne never lose round 1. With this matchup over the last 10 games or so, it has gotten a bit tighter for the Storm. They've only won 3 out of the last 10 games against the Panthers. Panthers currently on a 3-game winning streak there as well. They dusted them twice last year, 38-4 and 26-6. So the Panthers have definitely figured out a way to play Melbourne, especially over the last three fixtures. They had to play them three times last year, two during the regular season, and that thumping they copped in the finals. I just think Melbourne are always so prepared for round one, though. You can't ever knock them off. At this point, it's basically just to say, yep, Melbourne are going to make the eight, and you can figure out the rest of the seven teams as well. But we're starting to feel that way about Penrith. Penrith are one of those teams now where if they're not on the top eight, it's an absolute shock. If they're not making the top four, then it's an absolute shock. I just think that Penrith will not have the best preparation for this season. They do have to go play the World Club Challenge. They are missing a couple of guys. It took them a few rounds last year to figure out what their strengths were, where they could pick up a few more points here or there. They're going to have to do that without Crichton this year, who had a stellar year last year at centre for them. I do think that Melbourne will actually get this game done. With Pappenhausen coming back, it bolsters them so much. It really needs to work in the communication department, though, because from what I'm hearing is that Nick Meaney wasn't exactly the best talker out on the field, whereas Pappenhausen has a great relationship with Jarome Hughes and with Cameron Munster, and he tends to be the good communicator between those two. They weren't on the same page last year. Let's hope that Ryan can turn that around and get a win to start the year. I'm going the Storm 1-12. We move to Saturday's games now, and Parramatta will be taking on the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs in our first matchup for your Super Saturday in round 1, 2024. And I got to tell you, between these two teams over the last 10 games, Parramatta have absolutely dominated it. They have won 8 out of those last 10 games, the most recent win for Canterbury being that 34-4 win in 2022. With Parramatta, I do expect them to start a bit better than they did last year. They don't have the big top 4 team matchup to start the year. I think last year they fell in such a clump early and just really couldn't get out of it. You know, injuries piled up. They weren't winning the games that they should have won. I think they lost a fair few games by a score as well, and it never really came together. Dylan Brown had off-field issues. With Para this year, I do expect them to return to a bit more of the form that we've seen over the previous 3 years prior to their downfall last year. They do get a couple of ins over the off-season with Kelman Tuolungi coming in. That bolsters some of their forward ranks as Sean Lane spent most of the season on the sideline as well. I just think Hopgood has to be the guy to play lock as well. I don't really want to see Madison in there at this point in time. I just think that Hopgood showed last year why he is a starting lock, and you have to go with your gut on that one. And no doubt Brad Arthur will. It's a question of who's going to play that other wing position. They don't have a lot of speed in the outside backs for Parramatta. A lot of it is reliant on Bailey Simonson being the fastest guy out there, and you don't necessarily think of Bailey Simonson as a genuine speedster. So Sean Russell will probably get that spot. He ran down Xavier Savage the other day, so I'm hoping to see him in full flight a lot more this season for Parramatta. For Canterbury, the big thing for me is, are their signings going to work? With Crichton coming in, I'm hearing that he's probably going to play centre, and they're going to stick with Blake Taff at fullback. Not sure that's the best decision, considering they have, guys like Jacob Carraz and Bronson Jerry's now at the club. Connor Tracy's played a lot of centre and fullback as well. I just don't know if Blake Taff is necessarily the guy. He can do the job there, and we've seen him do it in big finals games before as well. But I just think that they've got so much more, what's the word? Stellar options at the back, more exciting, if you don't mind me saying. Not saying that Blake Taff isn't as exciting as some other guys, but I just think we've seen a lot from Stephen Crichton at that position, and then also Connor Tracy did an extremely good job when he came in as well, and has done a very good job for the Jets previously. Yeah, I'm going to back Parramatta in this game. I think it might take the Dogs a while to figure out what the best formula is moving forward, and once they do, they'll click into gear and win a few more games. Parramatta will get this game done though, 13+. The second Super Saturday game takes us to the Gold Coast, where the Titans will be taking on the Dragons. Two teams with two new coaches. I'm very interested to see how these two teams shape up. The big thing for the Gold Coast Titans is that Fafita and Campbell will most likely be out until about round 3 or 4. Now, that does hurt their opening weeks to the season, especially for a team that struggled last year. I just think with Des there, he is such a good coach. He's going to get them playing a very stylized form of football that is signature to Des Hasler. With the Dragons, Flano hasn't really coached since 2017. It's weird. I think Flano spent a lot of time out of the coaching spotlight, not in a head coaching role. And there were times where I thought he was loving being a commentator and analyst way too much to even go back and coach, because it is a double edged sword. There's so much pressure that comes on NRL head coaches these days. He gets to play and coach his son, though, which is something that, whether you like it or not, nepotism, call it nepotism if you'd like to, but it's always a fun thing to have as part of your team. And whether some of the Dragons guys agree with it or not, I think Flano will start alongside Ben Hunt in the halves this year. Just look at the Dragons team, and there's nothing really popping out at me that says we're going to win this game. However, the Dragons tend to start seasons pretty hot. And I think the Titans are a little bit down on troops. They're missing a couple of guys. Bo Fermor comes back. Really interested to see how he goes this season. Maybe playing on a different side of the field as well. Difficult matchup for me to pick here. I'm actually going to go with the Dragons winning this game. I didn't think that I would, having looked at it, but with some of the outs that the Gold Coast have, I just see the Dragons starting this season quicker than the Titans this year, and they'll get the jump on them 1-12. The last game to finish up round 1 is the Dolphins taking on my North Queensland Cowboys at Suncorp Stadium on Sunday. I just think with the Cowboys, they can't have the season that they had last year. I know that the Dolphins have gotten a lot better this year. I'm very interested to see the matchup with Herbie Farnworth, and I'm going to say Zach Labart will be starting at centre for the Cowboys on that right side. But for the Cowboys, they've got to have a bounce back year. They're just too good to miss the finals. I was very impressed with their 2022 season. I had high hopes coming into 2023. I had them picked in the top 4, and I think a lot of people did as well. But I'm not going to make that mistake with the Warriors this year as well, and potentially the Knights. I think the Cowboys will be hurt by last year, and the new captains for me is a statement of intent. They've got Cotter, they've got Dearden leading them around the park now. It's a look to the future, and I think that guys like Townsend and Taumalolo will take a little bit of a back seat this year. I expect Taumalolo to be playing a bit more prop minutes. He has the motor to be able to go longer than that, but I just think that, they're too good to miss out again this year. For the Dolphins, I expect them to be a little bit lackluster this year in terms of their start to the year. Last year, it was almost impossible to match up with them round 1. And I think the Roosters got a little bit hosed there in that round 1 matchup. There was way too much energy. There was way too much talk about them for them not to come out and win that game. This year, there's not that much pressure on them. They've had their time in the sun. They're into the competition now. They're expected to just be a NRL team. That comes hand in hand with, not having much hype on them. And then this year, it's a little bit more of I don't want to say a dulling, because a dulling implies that it's going to be boring for the Dolphins this year. They have some new signings to be excited about. Flegler, Farnworth, I think Averillo was a great pickup as well. I just don't see them getting it together as much as they were at the start of last year. There's a lot of former Cowboys in this team as well. No doubt they'll be wanting to show the North Queensland faithful why they let them go, or why they potentially left the club and said, you should have stuck with me. There's a couple of guys there that I would like back as well. But I'm actually going to go the North Queensland Cowboys in this matchup, guys. I think they're going to be ready for this year. Last year we weren't, but I'm going to expect the Cowboys to win this one 13+. So that is it for this week's video, guys. Let me know what you think about my tips down in the comments section below. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. We bring out so much content each and every week. Please make sure that you go and join our fantasy and tipping comps for this year. The link is in the description, and I'll catch you on the next one.